Did you know that in 2024, Chinese shipyards built more tonnage of new ships in a single year than the United States has produced since the end of World War II? That's right, in just 12 months, China outbuilt an entire superpower's shipbuilding industry spanning over decades. But here's the twist, it's not just about cargo ships. China's civilian shipyards are also fueling the rise of the world's largest navy. Meanwhile, the United States and the United Kingdom, once the undisputed masters of the sea, are struggling to keep pace. So how did we get here? And what does it mean for global power, for maritime trade, and for the future of naval warfare? Let's get into it. China's shipbuilding story is a comeback centuries in the making. In the early 1400s, Admiral Zheng commanded the treasure fleet. These were wooden giants that dwarfed European vessels of the time. But by the 18th century, China had turned inward. The Qing dynasty neglected naval modernization. Meanwhile, Europe, especially Britain, was building global empires powered by shipyards along the Thames and the Clyde rivers. Fast forward to the 20th century, the United States became the arsenal of democracy. America's shipyards pumped out Liberty ships and carriers that helped win World War II. The United Kingdom sustained the massive Royal Navy. China, in contrast, had virtually no shipbuilding capacity. But things flipped again at the turn of the millennium. While Western shipyards downsized or specialized, China designated shipbuilding as a pillar of industry. It poured in subsidies and resources. By 2010, China had overtaken Japan and South Korea. And today, China dominates civilian shipbuilding and is rapidly catching up in the naval arena. Here's where China's scale is staggering. In 2024, Chinese shipyards captured 70% of all new global ship orders by tonnage. That means out of every 10 ships ordered worldwide, 7 were built in China. China delivered more ships in that year than the United States and the United Kingdom combined have built in decades. South Korea and Japan remain important competitors, especially in high-end liquefied natural gas carriers. South Korea's Hyundai and Japan's Mitsubishi still lead in specialized design, but China has been encroaching there too. By early 2025, China controlled 62% of the entire world's commercial ship order book. That included over 80% of all new container ships on order and nearly 2/3 of new LNG carriers. Think about what that means. Ships carry almost everything we consume. Containers full of electronics, oil, gas, raw materials are overwhelmingly built in Chinese shipyards. The United States and the United Kingdom, their commercial shipbuilding footprint is almost negligible. The US produces only a handful of domestic vessels under the Jones Act, mostly tankers and barges. The UK builds a few cruise ships or offshore wind farm support vessels. Neither play serious roles in mass market cargo ship construction anymore. And this matters, because merchant fleets aren't just commercial, they're strategic. Whoever builds the world's ships shapes global trade, global standards, and global supply chains. And right now, China holds the advantage. Now let's turn to warships. By hull count, China now has the world's largest navy, around 370 combat ships, compared to the 296 for the United States and only 70 in the Royal Navy. But hull count only tells part of the story. The US still leads in tonnage and capability with 11 nuclear aircraft carriers. These are the largest and most advanced ships in the world. China, in comparison, has 2 operational carriers, both using ski jump ramps, and 1 advanced carrier in trials. The Royal Navy, though smaller, remains technologically advanced with nuclear submarines and 2 aircraft carriers designed for F-35 operations. The real story, though, is speed. Chinese shipyards are pumping out destroyers, frigates, and amphibious ships at a pace the West simply cannot match. In the past decade, China has launched more than 20 Type 052D destroyers and 8 massive Type 055 cruisers. Each of these ships rivals or exceeds the Western equivalents in size and firepower. The US in that same period commissioned fewer than a dozen destroyers, and the Royal Navy only a handful of frigates and submarines. Submarines remain a Western stronghold. US and UK nuclear submarines are still quieter and much more deadly than their Chinese counterparts. But China is improving there too, even if the progress is slow. A striking comparison comes from US Navy intelligence. They estimate Chinese shipyards' capacity is 200 times greater than America's. That means China can replace losses and expand its fleet faster than any Western Navy in a prolonged naval battle. And here's the kicker. Around 70% of Chinese warships were launched after 2010. That means China's fleet is not only big, but it's young. Meanwhile, many US ships date back to the Cold War and will need replacements soon. This is not just a numbers race, it's a generational shift. Here's where the civilian and naval world meets. China practices what it calls military and civil fusion. The same shipyards that build container ships also build carriers and destroyers. Workers, docks, and suppliers move freely between the two. When foreign ship owners buy Chinese tankers, they are indirectly subsidizing China's naval buildup. In wartime, China could use commercial ferries, bulk carriers, and container ships to carry troops and equipment. In fact, the PLA exercises have already used civilian ferries to land tanks on beaches. Some ferries are even designed from the start, with reinforced decks and ramps strong enough for military vehicles. This is not by accident. It's a deliberate feature of China's dual-use approach. The West, by contrast, is much more compartmentalized. US and UK naval yards do not build cargo ships, and the cargo shipyards do not build warships. Their fallback plan is to take over civilian ships in emergencies. But these fleets are shrinking, often foreign-owned, and sometimes even Chinese-built. Western militaries maintain reserve fleets, like the US Ready Reserve Force or Britain's system of taking up ships from trade. But many of these vessels are decades old or not available when needed. China, by contrast, has the world's largest merchant maritime navy and could mobilize it quickly. And it doesn't stop there. China's Coast Guard operates giant cutters, some larger than Western destroyers, built in naval yards but just painted white. They act as paramilitary tools in disputous waters, such as the South China Sea. Recent trends have shown the divergence continuing. China is embedding its shipbuilding dominance into the Belt Road maritime strategy. It owns or builds ports across Asia, Africa, and Europe, securing global logistic hubs. Its shipyards are moving up the value chain, building not just bulk carriers, but also more specialized LNG tankers, cruise ships, and increasingly autonomous vehicles. China is also investing in green shipping technologies, methanol and ammonia-fueled ships, electrified systems, even designs for zero-emission container ships. Western companies often pioneer the concepts, but the actual construction, more and more, is happening in these Chinese shipyards. The West is only now rediscovering shipbuilding as a strategic industry. The UK has launched its national shipbuilding strategy, committing to sending naval orders and rebuilding some commercial capacity. The United States is also debating tariffs on Chinese-built ships, subsidized for domestic yards, and investing in new naval shipyarding builds. Both are experimenting with unmanned surface vessels and AI-enabled smart ships. But the bottom line is, for now, Asia builds the hardware, and China in particular builds at scale. So what does this mean geopolitically? First, control of sea lanes. For decades, the US Navy has guaranteed freedom of navigation, but with China's growing fleet and its control over global shipbuilding, Beijing could, if it chooses, threaten the arteries of world trade. Think about that. The South China Sea, nearly 1/3 of global commerce flows through these waters. China already has the ships to dominate that region in a conflict. Second, alliances and competition. The US, the UK and their partners are responding with initiatives like AUKUS, the Quad and expanding NATO-Asian cooperation. But numbers matter, and China's scale is hard to match without enormous investment. Third is the risk of maritime Cold War. Naval build-ups are accelerating. China is exporting warships to partners like Pakistan and Algeria. Western shipyards are teaming up across alliances to build submarines and frigates for Australia and Canada, and overlapping territorial claims from Taiwan to the South China Sea are flashpoints waiting to ignite. Finally is the balance of power. By 2030, China is on track to not just match, but potentially surpass Western navies in some categories. Meanwhile, it already dominates commercial shipbuilding, giving it an economic leverage as well as military muscle. That combination, commercial and military dominance, could reshape the global order. And that is why shipbuilding, something most people rarely think about, is now the centre of great power competition. So where does this all lead? One scenario is that the West invests heavily in new shipyards, in green technology, and unmanned fleets to narrow the gap. Another scenario is that China cements its dominance, making the world's merchant fleets, and much of its naval balance, dependent on China. Most likely, we will see tense and contested maritime environments, and an environment where shipbuilding capacity, not just ship technology, shape the great power rivalries. The takeaway is simple. Shipbuilding isn't about just steel and rivets. It's about who controls the lifelines of global commerce and global security. And right now, China has the momentum. So what do you think? Can the West catch up? Or is China set to reshape maritime power for the 21st century? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if you want more deep dives into topics like this. See you!